The conference room smelled like polished wood and arrogance. I stood frozen at the head of the table, my presentation still glowing on the screen behind me. Richard Alden, our CEO, leaned back in his leather chair with that smug grin he wore like armor. "Impressive work, Chloe," he said, tapping his pen against the mahogany. "But this isn't really a job for women. We'll let Adam handle the promotion." The room went silent. My throat burned. Around the table, executives shifted uncomfortably. Adam smirked from his seat, already savoring his unearned victory. And my brother Evan, sitting just 2 seats away, wouldn't even meet my eyes. I'd spent 6 months leading our biggest merger. I'd worked weekends, missed holidays, and sacrificed everything to prove myself worthy. And now, in front of everyone who mattered, Richard was handing my promotion to a man who'd done nothing but repeat my ideas louder. My chest felt tight, but I forced my lips into a smile. "Of course, Richard," I said evenly. "I completely understand." Inside, something snapped. That was the day I decided I'd never beg for respect again. I'd take it. I made it to the restroom before the tears came. My hands gripped the cold porcelain sink until my knuckles turned white. Through the door, I could still hear their laughter echoing down the hallway, celebrating Adam's promotion with champagne I'd helped budget for. My mascara bled black streaks down my cheeks. I stared at my reflection, watching myself break in real time. "They'll never see me cry again," I whispered to the mirror. It wasn't just about the promotion anymore. It was about every time I'd been interrupted in meetings. Every idea I'd shared that somehow became Adam's brilliant suggestion 5 minutes later. Every time Richard called me sweetheart instead of using my name. I splashed cold water on my face and reapplied my makeup with shaking hands. When I walked back out, my smile was perfect. Nobody could tell that behind my calm exterior, I was already planning something they'd never see coming. If they wouldn't let me lead, I'd build something they'd have to follow. My name is Chloe Banks. I grew up in a small town in Ohio where my dad ran a hardware store and my mom raised us to believe hard work beat favoritism every time. She was wrong about that, but I didn't know it yet. My brother Evan always got the easy path. Dad's approval came naturally to him. Mom made excuses when he failed. Every opportunity one had to fight for landed in his lap without effort. I thought the corporate world would be different. I graduated top of my class, earned my MBA, and climbed my way to senior analyst at Alden Corp. I thought merit mattered here. I thought if I worked hard enough, smart enough, long enough, they'd have to recognize my value. I was naive. The corporate world wasn't different. It was just a bigger version of my childhood dinner table, where Evan got praised for showing up while I got criticized for not smiling enough. But that day in the conference room changed everything. I finally understood the rules of the game I was playing. And once you understand the rules, you can learn to break them. Back at my desk, I congratulated Adam in front of everyone. My voice didn't shake once. I shook his hand firmly and told him he'd earned it. The lie tasted bitter, but my expression never wavered. "Thanks, Chloe," he said, grinning. "No hard feelings, right? Someone had to get it." "Of course," I replied smoothly. "May the best person win." He laughed, completely missing the threat hidden in my words. That night, I stayed late at the office. After everyone left, I opened a private folder on my laptop labeled Plan B. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about survival. About making sure I'd never be vulnerable to their whims again. I began collecting everything. Every sexist email Richard had sent. Every report I'd ghostwritten that Adam claimed as his own. Every meeting where my ideas were dismissed until a man repeated them. Every piece of proof that would show exactly who'd been running this company while the men took credit. I created a timeline, cross-referenced documents, and backed everything up in 3 separate locations. My hands moved methodically across the keyboard. Outside my window, the city lights glittered like possibilities. Sunday dinner at my parents' house felt like walking into enemy territory. Evan showed up late, as usual, and immediately started bragging about his new project at work. Mom hung on his every word. Dad nodded approvingly. Then Evan laughed and brought up my promotion drama, as he called it. Maybe if you smiled more, sis, he said, stabbing his steak, they'd see you as leadership material. You know how it is. You catch more flies with honey. Our parents laughed awkwardly. Mom patted my hand. He's just teasing, dear. But I saw the truth in Evan's eyes. He wasn't teasing. He believed it. He actually thought I'd failed because I wasn't likable enough, not because the system was rigged. I set down my fork carefully and looked at my brother. I'll remember that, I said softly. He didn't hear the promise beneath my words. Neither did anyone else at that table. They thought I was accepting their advice. But I was making a different kind of commitment. One they'd all understand eventually. For the next 3 months, I played the perfect subordinate. I smiled more, just like Evan suggested. I brought coffee to meetings. I took notes without complaint. I was cheerful, obedient, and seemingly invisible. But while the men bragged about their accomplishments, I listened. Really listened. I started noticing things. Secret bonuses that never appeared in official reports. Falsified quarterly statements that made our numbers look better than they were. And most interesting of all, Richard's consulting expenses that seemed unusually high for someone who never consulted anyone. I dug deeper during late nights at the office. The consulting fees were going to an offshore account. The same account that received mysterious transfers every time we closed a major deal. Richard thought I was too naive to notice. Adam thought I was too emotional to think strategically. Evan thought I was too bitter to see clearly. Their underestimation made me dangerous. While they celebrated their genius, I was mapping their corruption, one document at a time. One evening, I stayed late finishing a report. I was heading to the elevator when I ran into Helen Morrison, our retired HR director. She was collecting her things, a box of personal items in her arms. Chloe, she said, her smile sad. You remind me of myself, 20 years ago. Before they pushed me out. We ended up in the parking garage, talking for over an hour. Helen told me everything. The harassment complaints that disappeared. The board meetings where Richard controlled every decision like chess pieces. The women before me who'd tried to fight and lost. The system protects itself, she said. But the system always has cracks. You just have to know where to look. Before she left, Helen gave me access codes to old HR files that were supposed to be deleted. Use them wisely, she whispered. That night, I combined Helen's files with my own research. The picture that emerged was damning. Richard hadn't just denied me a promotion. He'd built an entire empire on favoritism, fraud, and fear. My voice was calm as I saved the final document. Then it's time someone flipped the board. I called my new file, the Alden Report. Inside were hundreds of pages documenting every illegal bonus, every manipulated audit, every buried complaint. It was a roadmap of corruption, meticulously detailed and impossible to deny. But I didn't expose it. Not yet. I'd learned something important about revenge. It only works when your enemy thinks you've moved on. When they believe they've won. When their guard drops and they get careless. So I waited. I watched Richard parade around the office, confident in his untouchable status. I watched Adam take credit for my work on the merger, basking in praise he didn't deserve. I watched Evan climb higher in the company, benefiting from connections he'd never questioned. And while they celebrated, I prepared. I organized my evidence into 3 categories: financial fraud, discrimination, and mismanagement. Each section was documented with dates, emails, and witnesses. I built a case that even the most loyal board member couldn't ignore. Every night, I refined it. Every morning, I smiled at Richard and said, "Good morning, sir." He had no idea I was building his downfall, one spreadsheet at a time. Richard started trusting me again. Or maybe he'd never stopped. To him, I was just Chloe, the reliable worker bee who kept things running while the real leaders made decisions. "You're invaluable, Chloe," he told me one afternoon. "You keep this place functioning. That's a real gift." I smiled sweetly. That's what I do best. What he didn't know was that I'd started scheduling fake meetings in the conference room. While everyone thought I was preparing presentations, I was accessing financial systems and downloading reports that nobody else thought to protect. Richard's secretary was named Brenda, a sweet woman nearing retirement. She liked me because I always remembered her birthday and asked about her grandchildren. She started leaving her computer unlocked when she went to lunch. I never took anything directly from her files. I just photographed screens with my phone, quick snapshots that looked like I was checking messages. Little pieces of evidence that together painted a devastating picture. Nobody suspected me. I was too helpful, too pleasant, too focused on doing my job well. The perfect mask. Evan called me late one night, his voice tight with concern. "Chloe, you need to stop whatever you're doing." My blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" "Adam told me you've been acting paranoid. Asking weird questions. Richard's getting suspicious. He thinks you're trying to undermine him." I gripped my phone tighter. "How does Richard know what questions I'm asking?" Silence. "Then, because I told him you were upset about the promotion. I thought it would help if he knew you were struggling. But Chloe, you need to let this go." My brother, my own blood, had been reporting back to Richard about my state of mind. "Why?" I asked quietly. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm trying to protect you," he said. "And protect my job. You're making waves. Just accept what happened and move on." That was the night I stopped thinking of him as my brother. He was just another man protecting the system that benefited him, even if it meant sacrificing me. I hung up without saying goodbye. The next week, I applied for a leadership program at Harrison Industries, Alden Corp's main competitor. I didn't expect to get in. I just needed Richard to think I was moving on. But something unexpected happened. Harrison Industries was backed by several investors who also had stakes in Alden Corp. When they saw my application, they got curious. Why would Richard's top analyst want to leave? I started getting coffee invitations. Lunch meetings. Casual conversations that felt like job interviews but never quite were. "You did remarkable work on the Tecton merger," one investor told me. "Richard speaks highly of you." I smiled modestly. "I was just part of the team." "That's not what we heard," she said, studying me carefully. "We heard you were the entire team." I didn't confirm or deny it. I just sipped my coffee and let the silence speak for itself. These investors had money in both companies. They wanted to protect their investments. And slowly, I was planting seeds of doubt about whether Richard was the right person to trust with their capital. Richard found out about my networking. Of course he did. He called me into his office on a Thursday morning, his face serious. "Chloe, I hear you've been meeting with our investors. Be careful. People talk. I'd hate to see you embarrass yourself by chasing opportunities you're not ready for." His tone was paternal and poisonous. Like he was genuinely concerned about my reputation, not worried about his own position. I met his gaze directly. "Don't worry, Richard. I never chase opportunities. I attract them." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or the first hint of concern. "Just remember where your loyalty should be," he said. I smiled. I always remember exactly where my loyalty belongs. He dismissed me, but I could feel his eyes following me out of his office. Good. Let him wonder. Let him start questioning what he thought he knew about quiet, reliable Chloe. The game was changing. And I was tired of playing defense. My mother called that weekend. "Chloe, honey, I'm worried about you. Evan says you're not yourself lately. Why can't you just be more like your brother?" He's so stable. I laughed, and it sounded hollow even to my own ears. Evan had just bought a new luxury car. A gift from Richard, apparently, for his excellent work on a project I'd designed. The same week I'd been denied my annual raise because, as Richard explained, budget constraints. Mom, did you know Evan got a $40,000 bonus last month? Well, he works very hard, she said defensively. Did you know I generated $3 million in revenue for the company and got a fruit basket? Silence on the other end. You'll understand soon, I said quietly. Everything will make sense very soon. I hung up and stared at the wall of my apartment. On my desk, the Alden report sat in a locked drawer. Soon, everyone would understand. My family, the board, the entire company. They'd all see exactly what I'd been building while they dismissed me. The breakthrough came from an accident. I was preparing a presentation for Adam when I opened the wrong file on the shared drive. It was labeled Charity Foundation 2023, but the numbers inside told a different story. Richard was hiding millions in unpaid taxes through the company's charitable arm. Donations that never reached their destinations. Tax write-offs for services never rendered. It was brilliant and completely illegal. My hands shook as I copied everything to my encrypted drive. This wasn't just evidence of favoritism anymore. This was fraud that could bring down the entire executive team. I should have gone to the authorities immediately. That's what a reasonable person would do. But I wasn't interested in being reasonable. I was interested in being strategic. So I backed up the files, encrypted them, and added them to the Alden report. Then I carefully closed the document and went back to preparing Adam's presentation like nothing had happened. Revenge isn't about exposure. It's about timing. And my timing would be perfect. Adam cornered me in the hallway the next day, his confidence as bloated as ever. You know, Chloe, you're too emotional. That's why you'll never be leadership material. You take things too personally. I could have ignored him. I could have smiled and walked away. Instead, I stopped and looked him directly in the eyes. Funny, I said calmly. That's what they told every woman who ever replaced a man like you. His smile faltered. What's that supposed to mean? You'll find out, I said, and walked away. Behind me, I heard him laugh nervously. He thought I was bluffing. He thought I was just being emotional, exactly like he'd accused. What he didn't know was that his termination letter was already drafted in my files. I'd written it myself, carefully worded to cite performance issues, missed deadlines, and credit taking that could all be documented. When the time came, the board wouldn't just fire him. They'd wonder how they'd ever promoted him in the first place. The universe has a sense of humor. 2 months later, Alden Corp faced an investor scandal. One of our partners was investigated for fraud, and suddenly our board was scrambling to prove we had clean books. Richard panicked. The problem was that our books weren't clean, and he knew it. He called me into his office on a Friday night. Chloe, I need your help. You know our financial systems better than anyone. Help me prepare for this audit, clean things up quietly, and I'll make sure you're rewarded. I'd been waiting months for this moment. Of course, Richard, I said. I'll do whatever it takes to help the company. He looked relieved. I knew I could count on you. That weekend, I worked around the clock. But I wasn't cleaning up the books. I was documenting every inconsistency, every hidden account, every fraudulent transaction. I created a complete forensic analysis of Alden Corp's financial crimes. Then I did 2 things. First, I prepared a sanitized version for Richard that would temporarily satisfy the auditors. Second, I sent an anonymous, detailed report to 3 board members known for their ethical standards. I sent it Sunday night at 3 a.m. from a coffee shop across town, using a VPN and an encrypted email service. Then I went home and slept better than I had in months. By Wednesday, the media had somehow gotten hold of the story. Alden Corp under investigation for financial fraud screamed the headline across every business news site. Richard stormed through the office like a tornado, demanding to know who'd leaked the information. Adam locked himself in his office. Evan called me 3 times, but I let it go to voicemail. I sat at my desk, sipping my coffee, working on a completely ordinary quarterly report. Nobody suspected me. Why would they? I was just Chloe, the loyal employee who'd worked all weekend to help Richard. I was too helpful to be threatening. Too cooperative to be the source. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within a week, auditors were on site. Within 2 weeks, the board called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited to that meeting. But I didn't need to be. I'd already done my work. Now I just had to wait for them to discover what I'd left for them to find. The emergency board meeting happened on a Tuesday morning. I could hear raised voices through the thick walls of the conference room. Richard's voice, louder than the others, trying to control the narrative. When the doors finally opened, Richard's face was red with fury. "Who leaked those files?" he shouted at the assembled executives. Everyone looked around nervously. Adam tried to blame the accounting department. Evan suggested it might have been a disgruntled employee. I sat quietly in the corner, taking notes like I always did. Then the chairman turned to me. "Miss Banks, you prepared the audit documentation, correct?" "Yes, sir," I said. "Did you notice any irregularities?" This was it. The moment I'd been building toward. I stood up and walked to the table. From my portfolio, I pulled out a thick folder and slid it across to the chairman. "You might want to read this first," I said calmly. Richard's face went pale. Inside the folder was everything, 3 years of falsified reports, all with Richard's signature. Every fake bonus, every hidden account, every illegitimate expense. All documented with dates, amounts, and email confirmations. The silence that followed was delicious. Richard tried to fire me on the spot. "This is insubordination," he shouted. "You're done here." But the chairman held up his hand. "Mr. Alden, I don't think you're in a position to terminate anyone right now." Another board member was flipping through my documentation, her face growing more shocked with each page. "Miss Banks," she said slowly, "how long have you known about these discrepancies?" "I've been documenting them for months," I said. "I wanted to be absolutely certain before bringing them to your attention. I didn't want to make accusations I couldn't prove." Richard slammed his hand on the table. "Don't think you're going to run this place. You're just trying to take my job." I looked at him calmly. "No, Richard. I'm trying to save this company. There's a difference." The chairman cleared his throat. "I think we need to continue this discussion in private. Miss Banks, please wait outside." I gathered my folder and walked out, my head high. Behind me, I could hear Richard's voice rising again, desperate and angry. But it was too late. The board had seen everything. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. Evan called me that night, his voice panicked. "Chloe, what did you do?" "Richard's cutting everyone loose. My job's on the line. You have to help me. Tell them I wasn't involved." I stared at my phone, remembering every time he'd betrayed me. Every time he'd chosen his career over his sister. Every Sunday dinner where he'd mocked my ambitions. "You made your choice when you told Richard the first was unstable," I said softly. "When you leaked my concerns to protect your position. When you chose them over me." "I'm your brother," he shouted. "No," I said. "You were my brother. Now you're just another person who underestimated me." I hung up before he could respond. The phone rang again immediately. I blocked his number. Then I blocked my parents' numbers too. I was done explaining myself to people who'd never believed in me. That was the last time I spoke to any of them. 3 days later, the board called another meeting. This time, they invited me from the start. I walked into that conference room with my head high. The same room where Richard had humiliated me months ago. The same table. The same faces. But everything was different. I presented a complete restructuring plan. New leadership protocols. Ethical oversight. Transparent financial reporting. A system to prevent what Richard had done from ever happening again. The board listened in silence. When I finished, the chairman leaned back. "This is impressive, Miss Banks. This is exactly the kind of leadership we need right now." One board member whispered to another, just loud enough for me to hear, "New blood. Fresh perspective." Finally, they asked questions. I answered them all. Every concern, every doubt, every practical detail. I'd been preparing this presentation in my mind for months. Now it was real. When the meeting ended, they asked me to step outside again. I waited in the hallway for 20 minutes, my heart pounding despite my calm exterior. When they called me back in, every board member was watching me. The chairman spoke first. "Miss Banks, Mr. Alden's conduct is being thoroughly investigated. In the meantime, this company needs leadership. Someone who understands our operations and has demonstrated ethical integrity." He paused, and I held my breath. "Would you be willing to step in as interim CEO while we conduct a full review?" The room spun for a moment. Every late night. Every stolen idea. Every condescending comment. It had all led to this single question. "Yes," I said simply. "I'd be honored." Richard tried to take credit for my proposal one final time. "I trained her," he told the board. "Everything she knows, she learned from me." But this time, nobody listened. They voted unanimously. Effective immediately, I would lead Alden Corp as interim CEO. Richard would be suspended pending investigation. Adam would be reassigned. Evan would be reviewed for his role in concealing information. I shook hands with each board member, my smile genuine for the first time in months. 2 weeks later, Richard sat across from me in my new office. He looked smaller somehow. Defeated. The man who'd once seemed untouchable now slouched in the chair where I'd sat during my humiliation. I placed a letter on the desk between us. His termination notice, signed by the board. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated for cause. No severance. No benefits. No references. He laughed bitterly. "You think they'll actually follow you? You think this lasts?" I leaned forward, holding his gaze. "Richard, they're already following me. The difference is, I won't have to demand their respect. I'll earn it." He stood up shakily. At the door, he turned back. "This isn't over." "Yes," I said quietly. "It is." I watched him leave for the last time. Security escorted him to collect his belongings. The same security staff I'd gotten to know by name over the years, who'd seen how hard I worked, who'd wondered why I never got promoted. They nodded to me with respect as they passed. The media loved the story. Corporate whistleblower named CEO read one headline. Woman exposes fraud, takes over company, said another. Interview requests poured in. I declined them all. This wasn't about publicity. It was about building something real. Adam quietly resigned before he could be fired. He sent me an email asking for a reference. I deleted it without responding. Evan tried to call my office. My secretary, the wonderful Brenda who'd unknowingly helped me gather evidence, told him I was unavailable. Permanently. My parents sent a card congratulating me. I threw it away without opening it. I bought a small house overlooking the city skyline, a place that was entirely mine. No family obligations. No people who doubted me. Just a space where I could finally breathe. On my first night there, I stood on the balcony and watched the lights of the city I'd conquered. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. But with quiet satisfaction. I'd proven something important, that competence beats corruption. That patience beats power. That the woman they dismissed as too emotional had been the most strategic person in the room. 6 months later, I walked into the same conference room where this story began. The same polished table. The same leather chairs. even some of the same board members. But I wasn't standing at the head of the table presenting to Richard anymore. I was sitting in his chair, running the meeting, making the decisions. The interim tag had been removed from my title. After 90 days of record profits, ethical operations, and restored investor confidence, the board made it permanent. Chloe Banks, Chief Executive Officer. I straightened my blazer and opened my laptop. Let's begin, I said. Around the table, executives who'd once ignored me now hung on my every word. The company that had dismissed me as not leadership material now trusted me to lead them through the most important transformation in our history. As I started the presentation, I caught my reflection in the window behind the conference table. The woman looking back at me was strong, confident, and unbreakable. And then, so quietly that only I could hear it, I whispered the words Richard had said to me that day. This isn't a job for women. I smiled at my reflection. You were wrong, I said. This is exactly a job for women. Then I turned back to my team and got to work.